Archbishop Lefebvre on true and false obedience.
Vive le Christ roi!
All the quotes in this episode from Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre can be found at thecatacombs.org. One of the greatest lies, if not the greatest, of the modernist crisis is this: you must obey. For decades, Catholics have been told that obedience is absolute, that even when bishops impose heresy, even when Rome demands submission to error, even when the very foundations of the church are shaken, we must obey. But this is a lie. Archbishop Lefebvre warned us. Satan's masterstroke will therefore be to spread the revolutionary principles introduced into the church by the authority of the church itself, placing this authority in a situation of incoherence and permanent contradiction. So long as this ambiguity has not been dispersed, disasters will multiply within the church. We must acknowledge that the trick has been well played and that Satan's lie has been masterfully utilized. The church will destroy herself through obedience. You must obey. Whom or what must we obey? We don't know exactly. Woe to the man who does not consent. He thereby earns the right to be trampled underfoot, to be calumniated, to be deprived of everything which allowed him to live. He is a heretic, a schismatic. Let him die. That is all he deserves. He said this on October 13th in 1974. This is the weaponization of obedience. Obedience, when properly ordered, is a virtue, but when it contradicts the faith, it becomes a weapon in the hands of Modernist Rome, a tool used to subjugate the faithful, silence resistance, and impose Vatican II's errors under the guise of loyalty. St. Thomas Aquinas teaches, "Now sometimes the things commanded by a superior are against God. Therefore, superiors are not to be obeyed in all things." This was taken from his Summa Theologica, Part 2 of the second part, Question 104, Article 5. Today, we will hear directly from Archbishop Lefebvre as he exposes false obedience, the Vatican's ultimate deception, and why true obedience sometimes requires disobedience. Modernist Rome wants you to believe that obedience is the highest virtue. But Archbishop Lefebvre set the record straight. He says, "At this stage, it is relevant to remind Catholics all over the world that obedience to the Pope is not a primary virtue. The hierarchy of virtues starts with the three theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, followed by the four cardinal virtues of justice, temperance, prudence, and fortitude. Obedience is a derivative of the cardinal virtue of justice. Therefore, it is far from ranking first in the hierarchy of virtues." This was said in a suppressed interview in 1978. Obedience is not first. Faith is first. The faith. If obedience contradicts faith, it is not true obedience. Now, sometimes the things commanded by a superior are against God. Therefore, superiors are not to be obeyed in all things. This quote of St. Thomas Aquinas must be said again, as this is Catholic doctrine, not some modernist distortion. So why do Catholics today submit to error in the name of obedience? Rome has weaponized obedience to force submission to heresy and error. The new Mass was imposed in the name of obedience. the errors and heresies of Vatican II were accepted in the name of obedience. The persecution of true Catholics is carried out in the name of obedience. Archbishop Lefebvre saw it clearly. Satan has really succeeded in pulling off a masterstroke. He is succeeding in having those who keep the Catholic faith condemned by the very people who should be defending and propagating it. Satan reigns through ambiguity and incoherence, which are his means of combat and which deceive men of little faith. Satan's masterstroke, by which he is bringing about the auto-destruction of the church, is therefore to use obedience in order to destroy the faith, authority against truth. He said this on October 13th in 1974. This is the weaponization of obedience. In an interview in July of 1978, Archbishop Lefebvre said, "One must understand the meaning of obedience and must distinguish between blind obedience and the virtue of obedience. Indiscriminate obedience is actually a sin against the virtue of obedience." Modernist Rome demands submission, not to Catholic truth, but to revolutionary principles, ambiguity, and destruction. In a conference held in Econ on August 2nd, 1976, Archbishop Lefebvre says this: "How could we, by a blind and servile obedience, go along with these schismatics who ask us to collaborate in their enterprise of demolishing the church? True obedience serves the faith. False obedience serves a modernism. Every Catholic can and must resist anyone in the church who lays hands on his faith." Archbishop Lefebvre continues, "The faith of the eternal church, upheld by his childhood catechism. The defense of his faith is the first duty of every Christian, more especially of every priest and bishop. Wherever an order carries with it the danger of corrupting faith and morals, disobedience becomes a grave duty." He said this in Letter to Friends and Benefactors, number 9 of 1975. Modernist Rome tells us, you must obey. You must not criticize Vatican II. You must not reject the new Mass. But Archbishop Lefebvre saw through this lie. He says, now our disobedience is motivated by the need to keep the Catholic faith. To collaborate in the destruction of the church is to betray the church and to betray our Lord Jesus Christ. He said this in Can Obedience Oblige Us to Disobey? March 29th, 1988. True obedience cannot lead to apostasy. Archbishop Lefebvre says, the church will destroy herself through obedience. He said this on October 13th, 1974. Archbishop Lefebvre was right. This is Satan's masterstroke, to turn obedience into a weapon against the faith. True obedience does not serve error. True obedience resists error. Catholics must choose: submit to Modernist Rome or resist and defend the Catholic faith. It is impossible for us to do this. To collaborate in the destruction of the church is to betray the church and to betray our Lord Jesus Christ. There is no middle ground. Choose your side.
Si de que tembléis, mi Dios, yo solo la causa fui. Ay, Dios, ¿qué será de mí, mi Dios, cuando tiemble yo y no voy? Dios tembláis porque al frío padecéis pena y dolor, como de vuestro rigor temblaré yo, niño mío, si ahora vos que siendo Dios al hielo tembláis así. Ay Dios, ¿qué será de mí, mi Dios, cuando tiemble yo y no vos? Si de que tembléis, mi Dios, yo solo la causa fui. Ay Dios, ¿qué será de mí, mi Dios, cuando tiemble yo y no vos?